Checkers is such an interesting game. Basically everyone has played it, but I don't think I've ever come across someone who's hyped to play checkers. You know what I mean? It seems like it was just preloaded into all of our memories for some reason, and none of us actually care enough to play it. So how did that happen? We can find the first version of checkers and everything else back in ancient Egypt. You moved pieces like this instead of diagonally, and instead of jumping over pieces to capture them, you'd surround it on two sides like this. Ancient Greeks also played this game and called it
Petia.
Then the Romans did what they always would and made a knockoff version. And they called it the Game of the Little Soldiers, which makes it sound so silly. Anyway, a while later, we got the Spain update with Albuquerque, which introduced the whole jumping over pieces idea. Then France added the last two rules that we still use today. You could now crown the pieces by getting them to the other side of the board, turning them into kings, which could move backwards. And now whenever there was a chance to jump a piece, you had to do it no matter what. Yeah, apparently that's still a rule. Somehow I never knew about that. Anyway, since this game was so easy to learn and play, it spread all over the world like crazy, leading us to now, where checkers, or drafts, is still taught to kids for the same reasons. And then we grow up, and we realize checkers is so simple that it doesn't stand a chance against way more interesting and fun games like chess, Clue, Catan, or literally any video game. Since younger and younger kids are getting smart enough to choose to play those games, we're essentially letting checkers rot away in the sands of time. So I'm here to give checkers a fresh new update with plenty of new features and make it better than it's ever been. It's finally time for Checkers 2. Alrighty, so here we've got our board and our pieces. And before we get too far, this looks way too confusing with the pieces being the same color as the board. So I'm thinking instead we can make it look a little more like our chess 2 board, being blue and a little less blue. Anyway, here's our priorities for the remake. Number 1 is we need to make it more interesting. More rules, more mechanics, whatever we can do to make it hold our attention spans. And number 2 is kind of the opposite to balance it out. We want the game to still be accessible enough, meaning it's still easy to set up, and new players will be able to catch on to the rules without too much confusion. Like any good game, it should be balanced, which regular checkers almost is. And last, it shouldn't feel too different from original checkers, although this isn't as important as priority number 1. Let's start by looking at the layout. Each player gets 12 identical pieces that start on their side's darker squares. And there's a pretty big problem with this. This right here is the best move you can make. That's usually followed by this, which is the best move for them, and then this being the next best move. Just like tic-tac-toe and Connect 4, both players can keep playing perfectly, ending in a draw. Nobody wins, no fun. You might think this isn't a problem because games like chess end the same way with 2 perfect players. The difference is, with chess, it is extremely hard to play perfectly because there's multiple moves that could be just as good as each other due to the different kinds of pieces. But with checkers, it's such a real problem that official checkers tournaments, yes, those exist, require players to start with 3 randomly selected moves so that each game can stop looking the exact same as the last one. With that in mind, I think our biggest solution is to just get some variety in our pieces. Now you might be worried that this will end up just looking like another version of chess or something, with each piece having its own role or whatever, but let me just pitch some ideas for these new checker pieces, then in a minute I'll tell you how we can make this whole game way more interesting. Our first piece will be just a normal piece. Regular movement diagonally forward, unless it's jumping over pieces, which captures them. And just a reminder, you can jump over multiple pieces in the same turn, as long as they're lined up correctly. Then for our first new piece, let's keep the circle shape and make it a bagel. Let me just get all these dots on here. Bagel. This will be one of the most simple pieces, moving 1 space diagonally forward like normal, but it can't jump over other pieces. Instead, it just captures them by going 1 spot over, taking them straight from that spot. So in this situation, a normal piece couldn't jump because it's blocked on the other side, but the bagel can still capture by just taking this piece straight off the board. It'll take the bagel longer to get to the other side because it can't skip over any like the regular ones can. And keep in mind the bagel doesn't jump, so it can't chain together attacks. It only captures 1 piece at a time. That makes the bagel seem pretty bad, but you'll see why it's useful in a minute. Real quick, I forgot we need to make the 2 colors. Got red and red. Nice. And I know I switched it from black to white, but I think it's a little easier to see visually. Next up, we've got the bomb. This one will move normally one space at a time, including jumping over pieces, but it has one big catch. Whenever the bomb gets captured, it explodes, capturing all the pieces within this radius. So it would capture both of these red pieces and even your own bagel. It doesn't matter who's in the explosion, it's gonna hurt. This makes it a very offensive piece, but it has a big risk of destroying your own pieces as well. Also, here's a quick note. Just like normal checkers, all of our pieces can only move forward until they get crowned, letting them move forwards and backwards in their usual patterns. And normally crowning turns pieces into kings, but if you ask me, I don't think it's necessary to define the gender of a freaking bagel. So for all the pieces, we'll just call them crowned. And if this were a real physical game, we would show that by having a different design on the opposite side of the piece. Crowned bagel. Now these are cool and all, but let's get into some more unique pieces. This right here is the pancake. That's a butter, not a crown. What are the key features of pancakes? They're soft, they taste good, and they're in a perfect flat shape that lets them stack. So the pancake's movement will be normal, but when it jumps a piece, instead of capturing it, the pancake just stacks on top of it, landing on the opposite side, now being 2 pieces tall. Anytime the pancake jumps, either in the same turn or different ones, it just adds those pieces onto the bottom of the stack. There is no limit to how tall it can get. But once the pancake gets jumped by another piece, instead of the whole stack being captured, only the bottom piece is taken off, essentially meaning the pancake has multiple lives. But this comes with some interesting side effects, so I'll go over those real quick. The pancake is particularly weak to the bagel. Since it doesn't jump, it goes one space at a time, it makes one move forward and captures the whole stack. Earlier, I specifically said the pancake stacks on top of pieces instead of capturing them. So if I jump a bomb, it does not explode, as it's technically still on the board. But since the bomb's explosion happens when it's captured, if the pancake now gets jumped with the bomb at the bottom, it finally explodes. The explosion affects the bottommost layer of pieces, not including itself. So if this piece jumped here, we'd go from this to this. I know it's a little complicated, so here's the before and after so you can get it. Then one last thing to address. You lose the game of checkers when all your pieces are captured. But since the pancake can't capture pieces, it only stacks them, that means red technically didn't lose here, right? No. There's actually another way to lose checkers, and that's when you have no moves left to make. And if I was red in this situation, I can't move my last piece under the pancake, even though it's on the board, meaning I lost and white wins. Okay, sorry, I know that was a complicated one. Let's move on to a couple slightly less complicated ones, being the frisbee and the vinyl. The name frisbee is annoyingly trademarked, so instead we'll call it the flying disc, I guess, which perfectly describes how it works. It can move as far as it wants diagonally, as long as it lands on an empty space. It can't move over your own pieces though, and it can only go over one of your opponent's pieces at a time. It lands on the next available space like this, and that captures it. It's basically the same as the kings in international drafts if you're familiar with that, but keep in mind it can't move backwards until it's crowned. This can lead to cool little puzzles, especially late in the game, and this is a perfect example to show off a rule we need to keep from original checkers. If we've got a setup like this with the crowned flying disc, we can chain together our moves like this, jumping over this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, meaning all 4 of them would get captured. But you might be wondering, what about the bomb, because it should have exploded when I passed over it? But I actually don't take off the pieces one by one like this. Instead, I make my entire move and then take all the pieces off, which would then activate the explosion after my piece was far enough away. And this is a pretty important distinction, even for our other pieces. That means a pancake stack can't be insta-captured by a regular crowned piece going back and forth. This piece can go back and forth if it wants, but it's only taking the bottom piece. Awesome. Now moving on to this guy. The great thing about vinyl is just when you think it's over, there's a whole other side of music for you to play. So we'll represent this by essentially making it a simpler version of the pancake. It gets 2 lives with none of the stacking shenanigans. It moves totally normally, but if it gets captured, it flips over to the B side, and this has a nice perk you might have forgotten about. With all the other pieces, we represent the crowned versions by flipping them over. So if the vinyl loses a life, it instantly gets crowned, and now can move in any direction. This is a bit of a double-edged sword though. since getting it to the other side to crown it the regular way means it no longer has the extra life. Once it's captured on the B side, it's off the board. And to make it a little unique to the pancake, instead of staying put when it gets captured for the first time, it'll instead be placed back on that player's side. You'll have to put it on the back most available spot, and since the whole back row is filled in this example, I go to the next row and pick whichever of these two I want. Awesome, then that is far from all the pieces I want to add. But before I get too carried away, I gotta introduce the main feature of this whole game. See, I've very intentionally been setting up the board differently for all these examples, and that's for a very good reason. Each player will get to choose not only how they set up their pieces, but which ones will even be there in the first place. Now, these pieces are clearly not balanced. Like, basically all of these are better than the normal and bagel pieces. So to fix that, we're gonna add a power system. Real quick, I'm gonna give each of these pieces a number. Normal 0, bagel 1, 3, 4, 5, and 2. Before each game starts, both players will get 25 power points, which they can spend on whichever pieces they want to create their set of 12. So if I wanted to, I could buy 2 pancakes, 3 bombs, 1 flying disc, and 3 bagels. Then I'd place them anywhere I want in the starting squares, being the first 3 rows. Looks like I have a couple extra spots, but I have to fill those in, so by default it would be normal pieces, since they're worth 0. And then maybe the other side decides on something totally different, with 3 flying discs, a vinyl, and the rest are just bagels. I think this is a super sick way to go about it, because it over-delivers on all our priorities. It's definitely way more fun and interesting. There's essentially infinite possible games that all involve their own unique strategies. With our PowerPoint system, both players get equal opportunity to use whichever pieces they want. And just as an added measure, we can make it even more fair. Let's say each player has to set up their side at the same time with some sort of block in the middle so that they can't see each other's setup. Kind of like Battleship. Then they lift it up and the game starts. Or another way is we could just take turns placing one piece down at a time from a big ol' stash on the side. I'd argue this still feels like checkers, but that leaves our last priority. It's gotta be accessible to new players. Right now it's pretty dang complicated, but I have some ideas to make it work out. First of all, we're getting rid of the rule where you need to capture whenever it's possible. There's gonna be so many combinations of things happening, and that would be way too hard to keep track of, so you can move wherever you want. Then if this were a real life game, whenever you'd add a new piece to your set, it would come with a little descriptor card that you would have to keep on the side of the board for everyone to see. And if this were some sort of online game, you could just hover over a piece and it would show the description. And the great thing about this is that it opens up the opportunity for us to expand the game as much as we want. I told you these were far from all the pieces I want to add, and I meant it. I have dozens of ideas that I can't fit into this video, and I'm sure you guys can come up with great ideas for new pieces as well. The more the game expands, the more possibilities for fun there are. And as long as we keep those descriptor cards around, everyone will be just about the same level of confused. Anyway, you know I can't just leave it there. Let's get into our very first bonus pieces. We're bringing back Monkey from Chest 2, baby. This will work almost exactly the same as it does in that game, where it jumps over any piece, including your own, but that doesn't capture it. The way it does capture pieces is by landing on them. So we could have a setup like this, and it could jump all the way over all these pieces, landing on this vinyl, capturing it. When there's no pieces around it, it can still move one space forward, and like everything else, it can't move or swing backwards until it's crowned. I'd say that's probably 4 points worth, and let's redraw it to fit our circle theme. This is getting kind of cluttered. And the last one for today will be the portal. That's a portal, not a cinnamon roll. Or maybe it could be the cinnamon roll. That's kind of funny. Let's get the frosting on there. Nice. This one will move normally, including jumping to capture, but also has the ability to swap places with any of your other pieces. This could help you save a valuable piece from danger, or just get one promoted sooner. I'd give that one probably a 3. But the best part is, if you guys disagree with any of this, we can just update the game. Like I was saying earlier, I have big ideas for new pieces, mechanics, and rule additions. Trust me, I am just getting started. Let's add one of these monkeys onto the globe for our tradition. And wait, I forgot to name the game. Let's just say it's Checkers 2, then in parentheses, by Oats Jenkins. I gotta get some credit, come on. This quite genuinely can be infinitely better than the original Checkers, and my work here is certainly not done. So let me know if you want to see more update videos, and comment any new piece ideas you have, and I might add them to the game. The one rule is they have to be named after circular things, No exceptions. I see those easier if you're a channel member. Thank you guys for the support. Get ready for all the Checkers 2 by Oats Jenkins updates by hitting subscribe.